support that we got.
As we mentioned, the world is today marking International Women's Day. Here at home, despite significant progress, the status of women, particularly in the field of employment and wages, continues to lag behind that of men. However, a recent study published by the Taub Center for Social Policy Studies reveals that although there's much room for improvement, Israeli women fare relatively well in comparison to their counterparts in other OECD countries. Joining me now in the studio is one of the study's authors, Liora Bowers, Director of Policy at the Taub Center. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Great, it's my pleasure.
Your latest study paints a less grim picture, showing a significant increase in employment rates among women, particularly among mothers with young children. Tell us a little about these findings.
Absolutely, and I think we do see a positive findings from this study. What we see is that employment rates among women in Israel are quite strong. There's been a great increase over the last 20 years, and employment rates among women of prime working age today stand at 74%, which is higher than that of the OECD countries by about 7 percentage points.
Is there an increase in the incorporation of women in the general workforce, and are they more educated women, less educated women?
Well, this trend of an increase of employment has been seen across the board. We've seen it in different sectors, Arab women, Arab Israeli women, Jewish women, educated, non-educated, even among mothers. One of the things our study showed is that there's been a large increase of employment specifically among mothers of young children, children ages 0 to 4, where we see that about 20 years ago, about half of such women were likely to work, and today that figure stands at almost 70%, to the point that it doesn't matter so much whether you have a small child at home, you're almost as likely to work as a woman without a child.
You mentioned that women of academic degrees are finding more employment. Are they getting paid accordingly?
Well, definitely we've seen increases in employment across the board today, and a woman with an academic degree is likely to be employed at 84% chance, which is significantly higher than women without an academic degree, which have employment rates of 57%. And in terms of wage gaps, I mean, we still see that there's a differential between what women earn and what men earn.
But what about the various sectors of women in Israeli society, Arab or Haredi women, and the comparison in wages?
Absolutely. So what we see is that Jewish women today are employed almost at the same rate of Jewish men. 83% of Jewish women are employed, which is really an astounding figure and a great increase over the last number of years. However, we see that employment rates among Arab Israeli women are still lagging far behind. Only about 1 in 3 Arab Israeli women of prime working age is likely to be employed today. But we have to say that even that is a really great growth from the rates we saw a number of years ago.
Recent statistics released by the Central Bureau of Statistics show that Israeli women still earn more than 20% less than men. How do you explain that?
Yeah, and it depends how you look at the wage gap. Absolutely, actually what we found is that women earn 33% less than men. However, a large part of that difference has to do with the difference in work hours. Men work on average about 8 hours more a week. Once you factor in the hours of employment, part-time work by women, what we really see is that the wage gap actually decreases to 14% in Israel, which is much closer to and actually very similar to the OECD average. However, we should note, though, that this gap has not decreased over the last 10 years, and we've really seen it kind of hold steady at about 14%.
How do we compare to the rest of the world?
Well, when we looked at parental leave benefits, maternity, paternity leave, because these are often talked about differences between Israel and the OECD. And what we find, actually, is that there's some good news also for women there. Women in Israel are paid at 100% salary replacement during maternity leave in Israel, which is very different from other countries, many of whom only might pay 50–60% of one's salary during maternity leave. However, we see really big differences when it comes to benefits for men, which we know ultimately help women as well. Fathers in Israel don't receive any sort of paternity leave benefits or parental leave that's specifically designed for them. And in this case, we see that Israel lags behind 29 other OECD countries which provide paternal leave benefits specifically targeted at men that they can often take simultaneous to women.
You've been researching women's employment trends over the past 20 years. In what areas have we made significant progress?
So we have made significant progress when it comes to employment rates in general. When it comes to the differences in work hours, we see women working more hours in Israel over time, men working fewer hours. So the gap between work hours is closing. The gap between uneducated women and educated women is closing. More uneducated women are working as well today. However, really the big difference still lies in that wage gap, which has persisted for the last 10 years, and also in the share of part-time work. 1 in 3 women work part-time compared to only about 16% of men.
Where do we still have a long way to go? In what areas do you think there's the most need for improvement?
Yeah, so we really looked at parental leave benefits, and there's really 3 things that we see that could be improved if Israel wanted to align with the OECD. One of those things is to grant benefits to men, specifically paid benefits, paternity leave at the time a child is born. 10 days of paid leave for a man would put us with the OECD standards, and also granting women the opportunity to take some of their leave benefits, specifically on a part-time basis. So instead of a woman having to go straight back to work at 100% after returning from maternity leave, many OECD countries allow women to take their benefits on a part-time basis. That allows them to gradually return back into the workforce, come back sooner, but also allows them to balance their family life with their working life.
Liora Bowers from the Taub Center, thanks so much for coming and sharing your knowledge with us.
Great. Thanks so much for having me today.
Pleasure. DrewsNet, a project management company specialized